Podcasting from the beautiful state of Maine, welcome to another episode of the Learning from Leaders podcast, the show that focuses on identifying and developing the skills and behaviors that will inspire, empower, and compel others to follow your lead. Listen as Patrick's guests talk about the powerful leadership approaches they have identified and developed, which are vital for leading in today's challenging times. These are the same approaches that will positively impact you as a leader too. Learning from Leaders provides the right balance of leadership research with real-world scenarios, making it easy for you to rise above your best. All right, let's start the show.
Hey everybody, I'm Patrick Veroneau. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Learning from Leaders. And this episode actually is a recording of a LinkedIn audio interview that I did with Stephen M.R. Covey that has all Q&A to it. And for those of you that might remember, I actually interviewed Stephen back in December about his book, Trust and Inspire, that had just been launched. And this really was an opportunity to circle back around because the paperback version of the book was just released as well. So there were some great questions in here from all over the world. It was a great audio event. So I hope you have an opportunity to listen to this and pull away some pearls. So let's get into it. Well, welcome. We're going to get started. Stephen, thank you so much for joining me. I had an opportunity to go back and listen to the podcast that we did the end of last year regarding your book, Trust and Inspire, which is now a bestseller. And really, you discussed the difference right now between command and control versus trust and inspire. And I was wondering if we could just start off from there. What is this model that you talk about in regards to command and control versus where we need to be with trust and inspire?
Well, great, Patrick. First of all, great to be with you again and with our listening audience. Excited to have this chance to reconnect. The basic premise is that the world has changed, and yet our style of leadership has not, or at least has not kept pace. And here we have all this change and disruption around us and this new workplace of remote and hybrid work and these younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, Alpha generation, and completely different expectations of how they want to be led, engaged. And yet, too many of our organizations and too many of our leaders are still kind of operating with the old style of leadership, more traditional, old school or hierarchical, top-down, command and control. You might call it a number of different things. And that's not going to work in this new world of work. So we need to move from command and control to what I'm calling trust and inspire. So command and control, the idea would be, I manage people and things. Trust and inspire, I manage things, but I lead people. So we need good management, even great management of things, of systems, of processes, of structures, of inventories, of the numbers, of the business. We manage things, but we lead people. But sometimes we get so good at managing things, we start to manage people as if they were things. And if we keep doing that, at some point, we're going to end up with no people and a lot of things because people go elsewhere. People don't want to be managed. People want to be led. Manage things, lead people. Command and control is kind of heavy, focus on efficiency. Trust and inspire is on effectiveness. Be efficient with things, be effective with people. Command and control, the focus is on kind of motivation. So it's external, extrinsic, kind of carrot and stick, rewards. Trust and inspire, by contrast, it's about inspiration. It's internal, it's intrinsic, it's inside of people. So I'm trying to light the fire within, because that fire, once lit, can burn on for months, if not years. Whereas if I'm only operating on traditional motivation, I've got to constantly provide more external stimuli, more carrots, more sticks, type of thing. Command and control is kind of a mechanistic view of the world. Trust and inspire is organic. I'm a gardener. I'm trying to create the conditions for the people to flourish, to grow. Command and control, the focus is on containing people, even controlling people. Trust and inspire is on releasing and unleashing the capabilities, the talent that is inside of people. So I think it's just a better way to lead in a new world of work, rather than trying to kind of just continue to view people as things. I view them as people. They are not just a means to an end, but an end in and of themselves. So I have two ends now. Get results in a way that grows people. That's what Trust and Inspire is all about, a better way to lead in a new world of work.
Interesting. If you just joined us, you're listening to Stephen M.R. Covey talking about his best-selling book, Trust and Inspire. And Stephen, as we're talking, one of the challenges that I am hearing most often now is around remote. And how do I inspire? I was just in a meeting yesterday with a global organization. They said, we're meeting less often, and it's difficult now to create an environment where we're connected and inspiring people when we're working more remotely now. How do you address that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's truth to that. It's more difficult. It's like the Olympic metaphor of diving. Each dive has a degree of difficulty of the dive. Some dives are a lot harder than others. And the degree of difficulty of the dive in a remote environment is higher. It's a higher degree of difficulty to connect, to inspire. And so because of that, then we have to be more intentional about it, more deliberate about what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. And so, but the principle of inspiring people, and how do we inspire people? Well, we inspire when we model the behavior that they would like to see. So try to model the behavior. We try to go first as leaders. We would be a model. We inspire others also when we trust them and we extend that trust to them. So we're not only trustworthy as a leader, we're also trusting. And when we lead out with extending that trust, trusting of people, that will inspire. And so again, we're more intentional about it, more deliberate about it, to be trusting of people. And then finally, we inspire people when we connect with people through a sense of caring and belonging. And again, in a remote environment or a hybrid environment, we have to be far more deliberate and explicit about showing people that we care. And it could be as simple as saying, hey, I'm just going to hang on after we do our Zoom call or our Teams call and just hang on for a few minutes. I want to just talk with you for a few minutes afterwards. And everyone else leaves and you stay on with one of your direct reports, one of your team members, one of your colleagues. And you just say, hey, just want to check in, see how you're doing, how things are going, how your family's doing. And I'm just trying to show people that I care, but care about them as a human being, because people feel when the caring, like Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And so I'm trying to show the caring. And I'm also trying to connect with people through a sense of belonging. And so that with everyone on my team, I try to have them feel like they belong to something, because in that you find a sense of identity. And you feel that again. You can't just assume it. And you're trying to create that sense of belonging for everyone. And that helps people connect more deliberately, and that inspires with them. And I'll add one last piece, that you also are trying to connect people to purpose and to meaning and the contribution, because that inspires, meaning inspires, purpose inspires them. If I can connect those that I'm working with to why the work we're doing matters, to the contribution we're making, to the purpose of what it's all about, that can inspire people. But all of this in a remote setting requires that we are far more deliberate, far more intentional about connecting with people through a sense of caring, belonging, and then explicitly connecting people to purpose, meaning the contribution, to tap into, what's inside of them. That's the idea. The same principles, but a far greater need to be intentional and deliberate about what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Yeah, I love that analogy too about the diving, the degree of difficulty, because I would certainly can fully agree with that it's just become more difficult. So for those of you that have just joined, I'm on the line here with Stephen Covey. He's talking about his new book, Trust and Inspire. If anybody has questions that they would like to ask Stephen, observations about his book, just set yourself up, request to be brought online, and I'm happy to do that. And I know Stephen's looking forward to being able to answer questions that anyone listening to this might have. Please do that.
Patrick, while people are coming in with some questions, add something to...
Yeah, please do.
Next week, I'm going to be in New York City with Chief Executive Audience, Executive Magazine, and the whole summit is all about what you just described: remote work, hybrid work, intentionally flexible work, and trying to figure out the different business models for it and the different working models for it. And I'm being invited to be part of this. I don't have the solution with how you set up all remote workforce or all on site or some hybrid. There's a variety of different models there. My focus is how you approach leadership. Are you doing it through the lens or through the lens of trust and inspire? Because I could be all remote and still have people feel like they're being controlled and micromanaged, even from a distance. I mean, there's tools out there of so-called productivity software that looks and feels like employee surveillance software. Your people, it says, I don't trust you. And then also you could be completely on site, and yet people might not feel trusted. They might feel like they're being micromanaged. And so whether it's all remote or all on site or some hybrid, those are just structures. Those are form. What really matters is the paradigm of the style of leadership of am I leading by trusting and inspiring people, or are I still trying to kind of operate out of the old model of micromanagement, command and control? That's just not going to work in this new world of work, where people have completely different expectations of how they want to be led, how they want to be engaged. People have choices and options. They'll go elsewhere if they feel like they're being managed like a thing.
Yeah, that's a great point.
People want to be managed. People want to be led. They want to be trusted. They want to be inspired. So that underlying paradigm precedes any discussion around how you set up the workplace. That's important, but what's more important is the underlying paradigm and philosophy behind it.
Yeah, great distinction. So Mark, you're on the line right now. You're open to ask a question to Stephen if you want now.
Great. Thank you, Patrick.
Sure.
Stephen, love your work. I saw you at the Microsoft Partner Conference, about 15 years ago, and I've been following you ever since.
Fabulous.
So thank you for what you do. My question to you is, when trust is broken in a situation where maybe you are under command and control, trust is broken, damage is done, how do you recover from something like that?
Yeah, great question, Mark. And I bet it's one that most of us, if not all of us, have, because it frequently can be broken for whatever reason. Here's the key principle. Well, first of all, let me say this. I believe that in most situations, but perhaps not all, but in most situations, I believe it's possible to restore it, to regain it, to reestablish it. But it's not easy, and it may not be possible in every situation, depending upon the nature of the loss of trust. A violation of trust that's on the character side is harder to restore than a violation of trust on the competence side. You know, if someone was egregious and intentional and really violated integrity or was just so self-serving, that's harder to restore than someone falling short because they didn't perform or deliver on something. So it depends on the nature of the loss of trust. It depends upon the willingness of both parties and also the nature of the relationship. Is it just transactional? If people just moved on, or is this still an ongoing relationship? But having said that, having acknowledged that it may not be possible in every situation, I believe in most situations it can be restored if people are willing to behave their way back into it. So here's the key principle. You can't talk your way out of a problem that you behaved your way into. So if we've lost people's trust through our behavior, words alone won't get it back. They're necessary, but they're insufficient. The only way to get it back is we got to behave our way back into trust, just like we behaved our way out of it. But I believe if people are willing to behave their way back into trust, I believe it's possible in most situations to do just that. So what do you have to do to behave your way back? Well, first you got to kind of confront reality that you lost people's trust. You got to own it and confront that, hey, we lost it. You can't be in denial. Second, you got to take responsibility for it. I call this practicing accountability and acknowledging, hey, I lost trust. I own this. It's hard to restore trust with another person if you're blaming everybody else for it, saying, hey, we lost trust, but it's not my fault, it's their fault. That doesn't give people confidence that you're taking responsibility for this. But when you say, hey, we lost trust, I'm responsible, I own this, I'm going to do something about it. Then the next behavior is, I need to right the wrong. That might include apologizing. It might include making restitution a legal concept to make whole. But I'm trying to do the best I can to right the wrong. And then I try to clarify expectations of going forward, of what I'm going to try to do to reestablish, to regain their trust. So I can tell them what I'm going to do to regain it. I'm going to make you commitments, and I'm going to keep the ones. I'm only going to make a commitment I'm going to keep. And I'm going to tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. I'm going to talk straight to you. I'm going to be transparent and so forth. Then the most important step is I need to now keep the commitments that I just made. I need to do what I just said I was going to do. I believe if you kind of do those things, if you own it, take responsibility, right the wrong, tell them what you're going to do going forward to regain it, and then do what you say you're going to do. I believe in most situations it is possible to behave your way back into trust, just like you had behaved your way out of it. And I can flip that around. If someone's lost trust with you, they need to behave their way back into trust with you, just like they behaved their way out of it. And I believe in that sense, I believe restoring trust is doable if people are willing to behave their way back into it. But it's got to be behavior, not just word. Problem you behave your way into, but you can behave your way out of it.
That's a great point.
Stephen, thank you so much. You can't talk your way out of behavioral change. Yeah, brilliant. I appreciate that perspective. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Stephen, David's on the line. He's got a question as well. David, if you want to ask a question, go ahead.
Yeah, this is very serendipitous. I literally just came across this in my feed, which is great. Really great conversation. Taking the time. Totally love command and control. I always say that in a lot of conversations I have, command and control is dead.
Yep.
It needs to have a funeral for it. So my question to you is just around, you talk about trust and integrity. So on both sides of that coin, what factors would you say the behaviors of showing vulnerability and ego have around the factors of trust?
David, I think they're huge. I think this is, in this new book, Trust and Inspire, I kind of start with what I call the three stewardships of moving from command and control to
You are now a speaker in the room.
Three stewardships to move from command and control to trust and inspire. And the very first stewardship is modeling. And at the heart of modeling is being authentic and vulnerable. People want that in their leaders. They want a leader who's authentic, meaning real. And they want a leader who is vulnerable, meaning they let people see into them. I love the word intimacy, but spell it this way. Into me, see, INTOMESEE. I let people see into me because by doing that, I'm being vulnerable. And it takes strength to do that. It takes courage to do that. But the very act of doing that invites people to reciprocate. It shows how real you are, how authentic. You're a human being. You're not trying to put on a front. You're authentic. You're real. You're even vulnerable. Now, again, I'm not asking you to go to the extreme. As Brene Brown says, vulnerability without boundaries is not vulnerability. So there might be some appropriate boundary. You're trying to be not only authentic, but even vulnerable with people, modeling that they can do the same with you, but also you're not waiting on them. You're going first. And what that does, it says to people, this is a real person. This is a growing, developing leader. And they're inviting us to be the same with them. It's interesting, David. I was with a headhunter, a partner of an executive search firm that brings in technology executives, senior leaders like CAOs, CTOs, the best of the best, the highest level. And here's what this person told me. He said, when I hire technology executives, here's what I've learned. Yes, I've got to have that technical competence. That's kind of a table stakes. I got to have the technical competence. But what I've learned the differentiator is leadership. And what I've learned in leadership, it's all about authenticity and vulnerability. And if the leader comes in and tries to kind of be perfect and present themselves as I've arrived and I'm this powerful, strong leader, and they don't show any signs of vulnerability and they don't show any indication of this openness and this real authenticity, I tend not to hire that leader. Why? Because people won't follow them. They're not real. I've learned leader that shows that appropriate authenticity and even vulnerability, has the courage to be vulnerable, the strength to be vulnerable. That's a real person and people will follow them. Yes, they've got to have the technology skills, but I'm especially looking for how open they are, how vulnerable they are, how real they are. That's a leader that people will follow. So you've identified one of the key things. And I highlight, there's a lot of things we need to model as a Trust and Inspire leader. I highlight 3 pairings of behavioral virtues: authenticity and vulnerability, the combination, humility and courage, that combination, and then empathy and performance, that combination. Each of those attributes is valuable in and of themselves, but in combination, humility and courage, authenticity and vulnerability, empathy and performance, it takes it to a whole nother level. And that's what people are drawn to today. That's the kind of modeling that's needed today to inspire people, but also to create the kind of culture that's going to really create the trust that's needed to be fast and innovative and creative that we need today.
I think you're right on, though, Stephen, in regards to the vulnerability piece. And certainly from a leadership standpoint, I want a leader that can say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I don't maybe have the answer right now. I at least want that in their wheelhouse. I don't feel comfortable if they were to come in and say that every day, right? That doesn't inspire confidence in me anymore. But to know that they have that, I think builds so much trust in individuals because it gives me permission to be able to say to you when I don't have the answer as well.
Absolutely. It does.
Yeah.
That's why there's boundaries.
Yeah, without question.
It every day that I don't know anything, then that's not going to inspire confidence. But if they say, you know what, that's a good question on that, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm going to learn about it and I'll get back with you on it. And do that appropriately. It says you're real. And also it says that's why I have you. That's why I have others that are experts that need that. That, again, is a balance.
Yeah, without question.
Humility and courage. And, and it's being authentic that this is who I am, but also I'm real and I'm vulnerable.
Yeah. So, Stephen, we've got people starting to queue up here. This is great. Michael, you're on next. If you want to ask your question to Stephen, feel free. Go ahead.
Hi, Stephen. This is Michael from Vienna, Austria.
Hi, Michael.
We have met several times.
Yes.
And also McKinley. My question is, of course, in your Trust and Inspire book, you make it sound quite easy to be a champion of change from the command and control into Trust and Inspire. But always time is a factor. In your experience, how much time should one take to make and to lead this change?
Yes, good to hear from you, Michael, again, my friend. Well, I think I think everything is moving so fast today. It's a different world. And the pace of change, the amount of change, the type of change, it's unprecedented. And it's only going to continue. Disruption. And so we got to also move fast. That's why there's a speed to how we can lead out with this. So can I give an example? I was just in your part of the world recently. I was in Metzingen, Germany, a couple months ago in February with a meeting with Hugo Boss, a big global fashion retailer. And I was with the CEO, great CEO. He'd been in place not quite 2 years at Hugo Boss at the time. And he shared with me this experience that he came in, brand new leader at Hugo Boss a couple of years ago. He comes in and he's new to the organization. The organization is new to him. With his top leadership team, he meets with them and he says, look, team, we've got this vision, this plan of what we want to accomplish. You don't know me as well. I don't know you. We could spend the next year kind of filling each other out, trying to learn, can we trust each other, whether I can trust you, whether you can trust me. And we can do that. And we'll spend a year. So that's one option. Another option is we can, from day one, start with trust and trust each other and accelerate the entire process of putting in place our strategy and our vision and bringing this about. That's what I present to you. Let's spend the year and get to know each other and decide whether we can trust each other. And I believe we'll waste a year, or let's start from day one. So I choose the latter. And I want you to know something, he said to everyone there in the room. I want to say this to you. I trust you. I don't need to wait. I trust you. I'm asking you, please trust me back. I think together we can create a culture of trust faster than we might have thought. Well, wow, this was remarkable. And it was refreshing. It was disarming. It was not necessarily how they had that in place before. No, he was new. He came in and people responded to this. They liked it. They liked being trusted. From day one, he started a culture of trust. He didn't wait on saying this has to take us a year or 2 years to build it. He said we can do this fast if we're willing to not only be trustworthy, but also to be trusting with each other. He led out. He went first. Someone needs to go first. The leader goes first. And he was not only trustworthy, he was trusting. Well, long story made short, he shared with me. He said, look, we got a 5-year plan in place. We're 2 years into it. And guess what? We are 2 years ahead of plan. We're way ahead of where we thought we'd be at this point because we have trust operating. We're moving fast. So I think we can accelerate the change that we're seeking if we lead out and go first. And that's the idea behind Trust and Inspire, is that there's a speed to this and what it does to people. And it's more relevant, taps into people's greatest sense of purpose and meaning and contribution. And also it unleashes the greatest talent that's inside of people. Now, I'm not naive. I recognize it's not easy. And when you extend the trust like this, you need to do it in a smart way. You build the agreement together, a stewardship agreement with expectations, with accountability to those expectations. So it's a smart trust. But look at what happens when you lead this way. When you go first, you accelerate the whole process of leading the change.
Great insight. Also, how does it work from the bottom up?
I think it can work similarly. Obviously, top down is amazing because when you're seeing this and modeling it from the top, you can really accelerate the process of change. But I also think you can do it from the bottom up. You may not impact the entire organization, but you can have a similar impact on your team, on your work unit by going first. And maybe you're the leader of a team. You model that on your team. You go first with your team. You extend trust. You be trusting of your team. And then you can begin to build a high trust team. And then that team, your team, can start to interact with other teams. And you can lead out with them and extend the trust with them, trust them first, and begin to impact them and begin to have this spread out. And then at some point, it begins to spread up. So it will take you longer to ultimately impact the same number of people. But I think you can have a similar impact fast with those within your circle of influence, fast right away, and be able to have maybe more impact than you thought. And as you see this impacting not only your team, but then the teams that your team interacts with and the teams that they interact with, and it begins to ripple out. So see it as a ripple effect. Where the drop water comes down, the ripples, the waves, they start with each of us. They move to our relationships, our team, the teams our teams interact with, to our kind of our unit, our division, our department. And then those other departments we interact with, and we ripple out. So it is harder. It will take us longer to ultimately impact the same number of people. But let's not underestimate our ability to still ultimately end up to where we want to end up ideally if we get enough of a critical mass operating this way. But it starts with one, and each of us can be that one.
Thomas, you're up next.
Thanks, Patrick. And nice to meet you, Stephen. I haven't met you before, but your father's book obviously inspired me 35 years ago, 7 Habits, amongst other books. I live in Melbourne, Australia, and I worked for the COVID response for 22 months for the Australian government. And it was an interesting time. I worked, I think, 22 months. You talked before about hybrid and, working from home, trust issues. So I worked in the office for 5 days out of 22 months. So obviously there's a difficulty for leadership to connect to the people. There was 5,000 people that was in the team I worked with and for. And it was interesting. The boss used to get on the Teams meetings. It might have been 100 people listening. And at the end of the session, he'd talk for like 20 minutes about the daily stuff. And then he'd open up for questions. And there were always 0 questions. And everyone had their cameras off and they were all on mute. And I remember talking to him a couple of times, and he said to me, Tom, what do you think of my presentation? And I was honest. I said, well, surely out of 100 people, one person would ask a question. And I think the difficulty that he had was that no one kind of trusted him, and everyone wanted to ask a question, but they just weren't empowered. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts were on that and how he could have done better. A very senior person in the organisation, was a global leader, and then he flew from England to Australia to help out, but couldn't get that trust.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting, Thomas. And I think it is very telling that there would be no questions, because the reality is, people have questions, and they're asking them offline, and they're asking them of each other and to each other. And they probably felt some level of fear to ask the boss the questions. And they might have felt that fear because they may have felt that this leader's style is one of more traditional, hierarchical, maybe top down, kind of telling rather than showing, directing and telling people what to do rather than modeling and showing. And they might not have felt safe. It's obvious they didn't, because surely they had some questions. And so you can't quick fix that, because it comes a little bit from who the person is. But at the same time, it's also something that is learnable, that we are not our leadership style. And that style might have worked in a different environment where people were looking for this authoritarian type strong leader. Not anymore. And so you need a leader that's authentic, that's real, that's open and vulnerable. And they probably need to model it by going first. And so maybe one way of doing that might have been to structure these calls a little bit different, of saying, look, let me present a few ideas. And then on this Teams call or Zoom, whatever it is, I think you said Teams, why don't we take part of our session here? And here's a way of maybe breaking the ice where there's some fear to be the one to ask the question. Why don't we get into some small team groups and come up with questions, and let's get into groups. And then I want to take the number one question from each group or something like that. So I'm inviting the questions, and it's okay to ask the question, because I'm going to ask each group to give me their top question. And then I'm modeling. See, I'm asking them, I'm opening it up, and I'm making it safe for people to bring up the tough issue. And then the key thing, once I were to hear a question, would be how I respond to it. If I shoot the messenger, then, hey, I don't want to bring up the next question because I just got shot down. How you receive feedback determines whether you're going to receive more feedback going forward. So if you listen, you understand, and show empathy towards it, and then try to approach it of thoughts around that, and maybe even put it back to the group. These are my thoughts. What do you think? What can we do to this? So these are all style issues. And my main message in Trust and Inspire is that we are not our style. We can re-script ourselves. Maybe we've been command and control our whole life. Maybe that's worked for us, but that's not going to be what's going to be very effective going forward in this new world of work and with these younger generations. But we are not our style. So often that's the native tongue that people grew up with, whereas Trust and Inspire is like a acquired tongue. And when the pressure's on, people kind of go back to their native tongue. And becoming self-aware of this, trying to model it. And maybe you do it in the little things. And maybe that seems frightening for someone, but if they can recognize we are not our style, we can shift our style and change and recognize there's a better way to lead. It's going to tap into people better. That's going to tap into the potential and talent of people. It's going to build more trust with people, or remodel the behavior. We extend trust to people. And one way to trust them is to say, what's your opinion? And when you inspire by showing that you care for them and about them, and sense of caring and belonging, and also when you try to connect people to purpose and the meaning, the contribution, that can inspire them. So maybe it's a complete leadership shift for a person, but I believe people are capable of such a shift. I'll just give you one example. And this was a person that was a baby boomer, or maybe even a traditionalist. It was Ralph Steyer. He was the founder of Johnsonville Sausage, which is one of the leading sausage makers in the United States, Johnsonville. And I think they operate globally as well. And he was very much command and control. And Johnsonville was still one of the biggest sausage makers and the like, but he began to see that they were not as innovative, not as creative, and that people, they're not as engaged in the culture, even though the results were still pretty good. But he started to see some slipping, but he started to see that engagement was going down. And he realized that his leadership style was getting in the way. It was the problem. He was the problem. Well, or his style was the problem. It was very much command and control. People weren't growing, weren't getting better. And he started to recognize this, and he became self-aware. He was the problem. That took a lot of guts, of courage and humility. And he said, I need to shift my style and lead in a different way to stay relevant and to bring out the best in our people. But he began to work on this, become self-aware about it, and chose differently, and began to believe in people and trust them and extend that to them. And he changed the whole purpose of their organization to being this. He said the new purpose was this, that most organizations the people exist to build the organization. But at Johnsonville, our organization exists to build our people. Kind of shifted it completely around. It's all about you and building that. And here they are, a business that most people would say, well, how do you inspire people when you're just making sausage? The joke that no one wants to see how the sausage is made. These are the people that make the sausage. And yet they built an extraordinary culture and they're getting great results. And they do it through the leadership style. But it was a leader that completely re-scripted himself. He was very much in the old model. And he recognized that he was getting in the way. And then he re-scripted and created a new style to stay relevant in a changing world. That gives us all hope that we can do this. And we are not our style. We can re-script our style.
Thank you, Stephen, and 100% agree. And obviously it takes a lot of guts for that sausage guy to do that as a baby boomer. But, not all of us are dinosaurs forever. So I think that's a great story.
Stephen, when you said that, I thought back to, again, the behaviors get you into the challenge and it's behaviors that get you out of the challenge. I hear that often, that the crickets on a meeting, it's because the behaviors created an environment where nobody wanted to speak up, and it's the behaviors changing is what's going to get people to want to speak up. So it fits.
Do you remember the story that Alan Malawi tells who's the former CEO of Ford?
Yeah.
I'll just make a long story short. He gets in, brand new CEO. They had their executive team meeting a week on the job. They put up all the slides of how everything is going. 323 slides go up. Every slide is green. Green means everything's good.
Yeah.
You could put up a yellow slide, meaning there's some concerns, a red slide, meaning everything's bad. Next week, second week on the job, every slide, over 300, they're all green. Third week, every slide, all green. And so everyone's saying, hey, we're doing great. But after 3 weeks, he then says, hey, team, we've had 3 straight weeks. Every slide has been green. And yet we're going to lose $17 billion. So something's going on and we're not addressing it. By you, let's get real with each other. Let's speak the truth. Let's be transparent and open. We can't manage a secret. I invite you to speak truth.
Yeah, there's permission there.
Next meeting, first slide out of the great. Mark Fields puts up a red slide, and Alan Malawi, he sees it and he begins to clap. He says, Mark, that's great visibility. Let's talk about what's happening. Then let's brainstorm together of how we can help. Mark Fields putting up the red slide, that they began to shift the culture because suddenly these meetings became real. People started to put up red slides and yellow slides. And Alan Malawi, in the book American Icon, written about him, said that the day the culture began to change at Ford was the day that Mark Fields put up the red slide. And I will add, and in which Alan Malawi responded with, that's great visibility, Mark. Tell us what's happening and let's brainstorm how we can help. Instead of shooting Mark down or saying, gosh, Mark, can't you manage your business? So how he responded to it, and he invited people to do it, got the culture going to where it became real.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. So Tom, you're on. If you want to ask a question, please go ahead.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be online. Thank you for having me. And Stephen, I have to say, your dad's work is massively, has been and still is massively inspiring to me. I'm actually going back through the 7 habits at the moment for the umpteenth time and getting a lot out of that. And I'm a massive fan of your work as well on trust, which has also been quite instrumental in helping me to change myself. I'm just looking at this question and this topic that you raised, Stephen, and your work as well on trust and inspiring people intrinsically, and thinking about the setup that we've got here as well. And it's reasonable to assume that everybody here at least has some desire or inclination to improve their ability to inspire others and to build trust. What would you say in relation to leaders who don't look at that and don't have a desire to go that way, who have more of a desire to use the command and control approach? How can they be convinced to change tack? Is it simply just a case of waiting until things go wrong or until they realize that things are suboptimal in their performance or their company's performance? Or is there another way of inspiring change within these leaders so that they have a desire to build trust in organizations and inspire them?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, Tom. Really insightful. And first of all, thank you for the comments about my father, also my work. Thank you. I would say this, that, yes, one approach is that you can kind of you can play the pain approach, which is that, hey, maybe we're doing good now, but is this really going to work going forward with these new generations, with these younger generations? And then you start to look at the data that maybe you're getting results, but what's the level of engagement on our team? And what's the level of retention on our team? Are we losing our people, our talent? That can work. I'm not against it. And to see that increasingly we're going to become less and less relevant, but still that might be lagging always in that. And pain does work, and it helps bring about change. I think another way is if people it's through the game, through the inspiration approach. If people can maybe see that, you know what, they can become the catalyst to bring this about. And maybe they had their own experience. Maybe there's a trust and inspire leader in their life, or they begin to reflect upon, has there been someone in their life of someone who believed in them, who had confidence in them? Maybe they believed in them more than they believed in themselves. I like to do this in my sessions on Trust and Inspire, is I ask people, would each of you identify a person in your life who believed in you, who maybe believed in you more than you believed in yourself, who had confidence in you, maybe more than you had in yourself, who took a chance on you, maybe gave you an opportunity. Maybe you didn't feel ready for it, but they said, no, you got this. I got your back. You can do this. And they gave you an opportunity. Maybe it was a coach, maybe a mentor or a leader. Maybe it was a family member, or a parent or grandparent or an aunt or uncle. Maybe someone in the community, someone who believed in you, who had confidence in you, who in effect trusted and inspired you. What that did to you, how you responded to such kind of leadership, how you saw yourself differently because of that, and how you felt and how you performed, responded to it. I find that most people have had such a leader. When you tap into that and what that did for them and then maybe say, what if you could become this kind of leader to another or for another, just like someone has been for you? I find that tends to tap into conscience, not just in the bad circumstances, humbling people to say, I got to make the change. But the conscience is, I've seen this, I've experienced this. And yeah, I responded better to that. Maybe others might respond well too. When someone trusted me, what that did for me, maybe others would feel the same from me if I could do that for them. And I find if I can try to paint a picture, tap into maybe their own experience, give them a sense of what's possible, that often being humbled by conscience and not just waiting to be humbled by circumstance, that often can accelerate the need to move to a better place. And that's what happened with Ralph Steyer. He was starting to be humbled by conscience or by circumstance. This is a Johnsonville sausage guy, but they still were performing well enough that he could have stayed with the old model. But he started to realize that his people weren't growing enough. And that tapped into how he had leaders that helped him grow. And he wanted to be that kind of leader. And I think it's inside of most people, even the command and control leaders, that maybe have had a trust and inspire model or mentor at some point to maybe be inspired that they could become that for someone else, can sometimes accelerate that process. So I think it's a combination of a lot of ways of saying we can become that. I also think if people can see that by becoming trust and inspire, you don't give up control, because a lot of people say, this sounds dangerous or risky to me. We got to make sure we get the result. And if they can learn that they'll actually get better results and you don't give up control, you just have a different kind of control. It's through the agreement that you build together around the trust that you're extending, where people can govern themselves against the agreement you build, but there's still control. It's in the agreement of expectations and accountability, not in you micromanaging them. And when they kind of get a sense of they'll get the result, we still have control. It's just done in a different way, a different kind of control through agreement versus through me hovering over. And it's actually a better way to lead. You can begin to give people, maybe they suddenly are more willing to take that risk and to try a new way of leading and maybe test it, try it, and help them kind of evolve and shift their style. It's a combination really of all of the above. And sometimes circumstance, but sometimes it's conscience. And sometimes it's their own experience, their own inspiration. If you're going to inspire another, the key to that is to first be inspired yourself. Light the fire within yourself tap into your own sense of purpose and meaning and contribution so you can help light it into somebody else. So combination of all of those things can maybe help people. But I like to just say to people, we're all on a journey that, none of us have arrived. We're all moving on the journey from command and control to trust and inspire to stay more relevant in our new world of work. And not just to stay relevant, which is the pain, but also to tap out, to bring out the best in people as the gain. And that is the more inspiring side of it. I think there's greater impact when we focus on the gain side, the inspiration side, than the pain side or the fear side.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate that. And I absolutely love what you say about self-governance, because I think that once people are empowered and enabled to govern themselves, they can achieve far more than anybody could tell them to achieve, simply because they will figure things out that nobody else can figure out from their vantage point. I've seen that in my own work when I've been trusted by bosses and leaders as well. And I've seen how I've been able to flourish, and I've seen other people flourish from the other side of the equation as well. So thank you so much for that. And please do keep up the great work.
Thank you, Tom. I agree completely with what you just said.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for that question. And I think it's a challenge that we all probably have run into, is that leader that thinks that they've got it all figured out, that they're not willing to change. And Stephen, I think of a quote by Eric Hoffer. It says, in times of change, learners inherit the earth, and the learned find themselves perfectly suited for a world that no longer exists. And I think we are in that place right now where you talk about command and control as the learned approach, one of many dysfunctional ways of leading, that it just doesn't work. And I think some will just have to feel the pain of poor leadership behaviors before they recognize that they do need to change, sadly.
Yeah. And I think that's the reality, Patrick. For some, they're going to have to feel the pain.
Yeah.
But the pain will come because increased command and control is less and less relevant. And like one of our callers, David, said, command and control is dead. It really is. What's happened is people have evolved from an authoritarian command and control to a more enlightened command and control. So they bought some command and control is kind of, it goes a little bit there, but it's just different in degree, not different in kind. And so it buys them some time, maybe, but not enough. It is becoming a world that no longer exists.
Yeah. So what would they call it? Like command and control light, right?
I actually call it in the Trust and Inspire book, what we call the, moving from authoritarian command and control to enlightened command and control, which is really a kinder, gentler form of command and control. But we haven't really crossed the chasm into trust and inspire, which is self-governance.
Yeah.
Point earlier, different in kind, whereas moving within command and control, that's all different in degree.
Yeah.
It's a better version. Authoritarian command and control operates on fear. That's what I can do to you. Heavy focus on the sticks.
Yeah.
Command and control operates on the premise of fairness and transactional exchange, what I can do for you. So that's heavy focus on the carrots. But it's still motivation. Trust and inspire operates on the premise of inspiration and partnership. It's what I can do with you.
Yeah.
You're tapping into the inspiration as opposed to motivation. Just different in kind.
Yeah. Now, Stephen, we don't have any other questions, and we're coming close to the end of the hour here. But there was one thing that I recalled from our interview last year that really was profound to me in terms of trust. And it was the concept of our need to give trust. We are so focused on making sure that we earn trust, but you talked about the importance of giving trust. I was wondering if you could just sort of end on that, the significance of that.
Yes, I think this is extraordinarily significant. It's why there's a reason this is the second stewardship. Modeling is the first, trusting is the second, inspiring is the third. So on this trusting, I think this is really big because here's what's interesting, Patrick. You could have two trustworthy people working together, both trustworthy, and yet no trust between them, even though they're both trustworthy, if neither person is willing to give trust to the other. So if trust is the outcome we want, a high trust relationship, a high trust team, a high trust culture, yes, we need to be trustworthy. And we earn that. That's our credibility. That's our modeling. But it's not enough to merely be trustworthy. As leaders, we also need to be trusting. We give that. So when I get asked all the time, Stephen, have trust earned or is it given? My response is yes, both. And We got to earn it, but we also got to give it. And I find this in the equation of trustworthiness times trusting equals trust. The bigger gap in most organizations, as I work all around the world, is not that people aren't trustworthy. Sometimes that's the case. It's more often that as leaders, we're not trusting enough. We're not giving that trust enough.
Isn't that correct?
Now, I'm not asking you to blindly give it.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be smart, but a smart trust with good judgment, with expectations, with accountability. I call that building the agreement together around the trust you're extending so that you can create a self-governing approach with expectations and accountability. But if we pay the price to do that well, to be trusty, a smart trust with expectations and accountability, people will not only perform better and get the job done and unleash their creativity, but they also will grow and develop.
Yeah.
And they like that. And that keeps them there. And they also reciprocate and return the trust. They give it right back to you. And it becomes this virtuous upward spiral of trust and confidence, creating more trust and confidence. And we'll tap into the best in our people or bring out the best in them. We'll keep them and we'll perform better. Kind of every measure goes the right direction. And trusting is what unleashes it. And it's the greater gap of what's missing in having trust in our organizations today. It's not the lack of trustworthiness. It's more often the lack of not trusting.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we're going to be able to get one more question in here. Beth jumped on the line. So Beth, if you'd like to ask a question, feel free.
Hi, this has been such an inspiring conversation. Thank you to both of you and also the speakers. Following on from what Tom was saying before, that was going to be my question. In terms of healthcare work, so I've always worked in private and corporate and I've recently transitioned into healthcare. And there's definitely a command and control because obviously there's life and death situations.
Right.
So scenarios, we've got a lot of people with an awful lot of experience and these new generations of doctors and nurses coming in, they want more flexibility, remote working. And it's not necessarily that they're not trusted. It's just the setup of the organisation that it's not always possible to allow that to happen because obviously the nature of the work. So in that instance, how can we try and attract and retain our people? Because it's becoming really, really difficult to do so because it's not paid the best because it's public service a lot of the time. How can we utilise trust as a superpower in that environment?
Yeah. Thank you, Beth. It's a wonderful question. And it's really important in healthcare where there's also so much burnout right now of doctors and nurses and the like because they're working harder than ever before. In some cases, just exhausted from it. So here's the thing. Like you say, it may be that there's some situations where people have to be present on site and you can't have the level of flexibility that they would like in all situations because of the nature of the service that they're providing. And yet at the same time, there's also maybe an opportunity to have some real open, authentic, two-way, ongoing dialogue of how to do this. So I've worked with a lot of healthcare organizations where the model has been heavy command and control. Mm-hmm. They're trying to evolve to a more trust and inspire model. And the reality is how you practice the medicine in healthcare might still need to be practiced in a similar way. But if you involve people in the problem and in the opportunity, involve them in it and enroll them in it, come up with the solutions together as opposed to kind of looking at it from I'm management and you're the caregiver, but rather we are a team looking at this together. How can we extend the trust to you in a way that you feel trusted, but also that we tap into the flexibility that you're seeking and the possibilities that you're seeking, the opportunities. Let's come up with this together. We trust you to do that. And also you're trying to tap into, you're doing meaningful work as a healthcare provider because you're saving lives and you're healing people. That can inspire people. And yet oftentimes people don't feel inspired. Yet the work that we're doing is inspiring work. And our style, our command and control is getting in the way of our purpose and our mission, our intent of we should be the most ignited people because we do such inspiring work. And there's some leaders that are doing that through their leadership style, So I think our style is often getting in the way of our intent. Mm-hmm. And if we can kind of involve people in this, involve the caregivers, saying, help us figure this out in a way that still is going to provide the type of healthcare that's needed, and in a way that is going to meet you where you're at. And it shows such trust in them that you would involve them in the problem, in the opportunity. We create the solution together, as opposed to us saying, we're management, we'll give you the solution. No, let's build this together. That very act of inviting them into this helps do this. I've seen healthcare organizations, hospital systems, and others build high trust teams, high trust cultures, where suddenly they're tapping into that fire within people that can reignite the passion they once felt, maybe, and have that burn on and on. None of this is easy. If it were easy, we'd all be doing it. And especially, like you say, in a very command and control heavy environment with a lot of compliance, because it's a life and death circumstance. But I'm saying that trust and inspire is even better in a life and death circumstance, because you'll bring out the best capabilities and talents and expertise of people. You still have guidelines. You still have a lot of the best practices that you know, but you're just still tapping into people as capable of following guidelines, but also bringing their best thinking and ideas to doing this better. And that they're capable of doing that. And we're tapping into that and we believe in it. So I don't think it's either or. I think it's and. And I think trust and inspire is an and approach to doing this, of being, of still having compliance, but also making this compelling and tapping into what's inside of people. Being authoritative without being authoritarian. Being strong without being forceful. It's a better way to lead. It's a better way to involve people and come up with a solution together.
Yeah, I love the modelling approach as well. It does only take one person to start that ripple effect. We've done heaps of work around the importance of civility and kindness in the workplace.
Absolutely.
So we are getting there. We're definitely on the journey, but yeah, I'm finding it's a little bit trickier than in corporate sometimes because of the nature of the work, but that's really helpful. Thank you, Stephen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Beth.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Beth. And I would agree, Stephen, spending a lot of time in healthcare, it very much is a situation where it is going away from command and control and more to that trust and inspire. So thank you so much for your time and all the insights that you've provided to everybody that's listening in on this and answering the questions and providing so many pearls. And as always, Stephen, I've fully enjoyed this opportunity to have conversation with you and to listen to your responses to the challenges or questions that other people have. So thank you so much for that.
You are welcome, Patrick. I love talking with you and love your approach to leadership, things that you're doing. I think this is the kind of leadership that's needed today, to model, to trust, to inspire. So I invite all our listeners to join me and me to join you and you, Patrick, with what you're doing to help become this kind of leader for our world, because our world needs this. Our organizations do, our communities do. We need this kind of leadership. I believe that each of us can become this kind of leader and help be a model who can become a mentor and ultimately impact not only our organizations, but even our world.
So well said. And again, thank you for that, Stephen. So valuable. Wishing you all the best. Peace.
Thank you, Patrick, my friend. Great to be with you and with all of our listeners. Thank you.
Yeah, you as well. Take care.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Learning from Leaders podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please feel free to rate, review, and subscribe on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate that effort. Until next time, keep rising above your best as a leader.